this family, because if not for your descendant, I would not be here today. I've been often linked with Michigan, being a Michigan boy, and I have to be honest, I was a Buckeye. I was born in Ohio, in Rumley, Harrison County, Ohio, and my half-sister married a man by the name of David Reed. He was an attorney in Monroe, Michigan, and when she became pregnant for her first child, I moved up to Monroe, where I attended school. And later I would marry my wife, Elizabeth Bacon. She was the daughter of a judge. And my association with Monroe, Michigan became firmly attached to me after that occasion. And I live there now. I live in Monroe now, and each year we have a Custer Week celebration, and I want to invite all the family to come. It starts on September 29th, and it runs through October 7th, and you're all invited to come and join us for that celebration. But probably in history, I would be remembered for a single day, the last day of my life at the Battle of Little Bighorn, and my Civil War career, which still stands today, that I'm the youngest Major General in the history of our military. At 23, I was a Brigadier General. At 25, a Major General, two-star general. I was put in command of the Michigan Cavalry Brigade. They were the 2nd Brigade of 3rd Cavalry Division on June 29, 1863. And your descendant, Norval Churchill, was in Company L, 1st Michigan Cavalry. The 1st Michigan was the veteran unit of the brigade. This was the first time that men all from the single state of Michigan rode together. Normally, during the war, you'd have a Vermont regiment riding with a New York or possibly a Connecticut regiment. The Michigan Cavalry Brigade, which I commanded, was made up of the 1st, 5th, 6th, and 7th Michigan volunteer regiments. Men from this part of the country, from this part of the state, came in, and a lot of them were raised in rural areas, so they've been around horses, so they were quite good equestrian. The 1st Michigan, which Norval was a part of, was the Sabre Regiment. They were the most veteran unit of the brigade. Now, when I took command of the brigade, I didn't have a uniform. I had been promoted from the rank of captain, made that meteoric jump to Brigadier General, so my orderly, Joseph Vaught, spent the better part of the evening trying to put together a uniform of some sort, and this is what he came up with. The papers took to writing about me as a circus rider gone mad. This was probably one of the flashiest uniforms that any officer wore during the war. It had 5 galloons on the sleeve. Gold galloons were indicative of a colonel in the Confederate Army or a general in the Union Army. I sewed some stars to the shoulders, and I adapted the red tie. Red was my favorite color, but I wanted the men to know where I was at any given time during a battle. When I showed up on the scene, men didn't take me very serious until the day Norval saved my life. We were just outside of Gettysburg. We were on the northeast side of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The Confederates were building up. After a short excursion into Gettysburg, which they had thought was a shoe manufacturing center, their attempt to go there to secure shoes. They were badly in need of footgear, so they had gone into the village to steal some shoes. And while they were there, a Union force saw them. They were a scouting unit under General Buford, brought back word to General Meade's headquarters, and there started a build-up of both the armies that came in there. The second day of the battle, July 2nd, General Howard was taking a terrible beating up on Culp's Hill. The Confederates had been very successful in securing Seminary Ridge the first day of the battle. The second day they were making an attempt to take over Culp's Hill. General Kilpatrick, who was my division commander, instructed me that we were to harass the left flank of the Confederate forces to relieve some of the pressure of General Howard up on Culp's Hill. We were to hit Ewell's command. I was rushing into Hunterstown with the brigade, and General Kilpatrick had set up a headquarters at the Grass Hotel. He had set his headquarters up there about 2 o'clock, so I came in, I talked to him, and about that time, some of my cadets, they were my front scouts, came riding into the town and said there was Confederate forces forming up just south of town at a place known as Felty's Farm. It was down Hunterstown Road. So I mounted the brigade. We rode down towards where this opportunity that we saw where these Confederate forces were building up. And I had with me Alexander Pennington's battery on 2nd U.S. Artillery. So I deployed the artillery with his 6-inch Parrott guns. He unlimbered the guns and positioned them behind the Felty barn, which actually cloaked them from the Confederates' eyes. They couldn't see it. The 5th and 6th were dismounted in a wheat field behind the barn, and I deployed the 1st and the 7th on the east side of the Hunterstown Road. Now we saw some of the skirmishers coming up. They were made of Confederate troops under the 1st North Carolina, the 2nd South Carolina, Phillips, and Cobb's Legion. And a legion is a unit made up of artillery, infantry, and cavalry. So they started deploying in a skirmish formation and were about to unlimber their guns and set up some siege guns to try to bombard our position. I cautioned Alexander Pennington to keep his guns quiet for the time being. I got a hold of Captain Thompson, and I got about 60 riders of the Company A, 6th Michigan. We could see some Confederate riders. In fact, it turned out to be an old West Point buddy of mine by the name of Pierce Young, who was colonel of the Cobb's Legion, and he was riding up in front of the forces down the road. They were to the south of us, probably about, at that time, about a quarter of a mile. And I had made a comment when we were at the academy together. Pierce, I told him, I said, you know, one of these days we're going to come into a situation where you're going to go your way to the southern states, I'm going to go my way, and we're going to come together in a battle, and we're going to have to do what's necessary to survive. Well, this would shortly play out when I said to my Captain Thompson, I said, I'm going to lead you this time, boys. Come on, follow me. And we put our horses into a trot. We were going down this narrow road, this Hunterstown Road, which was flanked on both sides of the road by split rail fences. So it was a little bit wider than a bowling alley, but we were rolling up the road when 600 of these Confederate troops under Colonel Pierce, they were Hampton's Legion, and they came riding at us. My horse, which was out in front, took one of the first volleys and went down. The horse I was riding was a black gelding by the name of Harry. Harry went down, dropped. I found myself head over heels on the dust of the dusty road, and as I was coming to, a Confederate officer was bearing down on me, and he'd drawn his saber, and just as he was making a slash to come down to strike me with a saber, your descendant, Norval Churchill, who was part of the 1st Regiment, 1st Michigan, which was deployed as skirmishers, broke free from his unit, knowing that there was an imminent peril in line for me, rode up and deflected the blow of this Confederate cavalryman that he was coming down. He deflected the blow, withdrew his revolver, and point blank shot the Confederate. Dropped his hand down and pulled me onto the back of his horse. And we rode back to safety. And that initial charge... In that initial charge of 60, we lost 32 casualties that went down. Many of the horses littered the road as we withdrew from the field. Pierce Young charged with close to 300 men down this narrow alleyway. What he didn't realize is we were set up to countermand his charge. As he come down the vortex of that road, the Michigan Cavalry Brigade, the 1st unit, issued Spencer repeating rifles. They were a 7-shot rifle repeater, opened up, as well as Pennington, who had double shot his Parrott guns, and completely surprised the Confederate marauders as they rode down that road. In such disorganization and dishevelment, they withdrew from the field, and the rest of the day, Hampton spent bombarding us with cannon shells, which lasted clear into the night. We were able to hold our position on the field, occupy him long enough that Howard's forces were not harassed up on Culp's Hill, probably saving the day for the Union forces on Cemetery Ridge, which at that time had been formed in a fishhook shape. The next day, Norval got honored in my reports. When I wrote my reports, I gave him commendations for that. But he was also a part of the 3rd day when Judge Stewart was going to swing in behind the Union forces atop Cemetery Ridge and cause harassment. We had been instructed by General Kilpatrick to ride the Little Round Top to reinforce the Union line there. Part way across the field, we got a courier from General McMurray Gregg that said there were Confederate forces forming up on Crest Ridge near a farm, Rummel Farm, just east of Gettysburg by about 3.5 miles. So the Michigan Cavalry Brigade got between Jeb Stuart and the back of the Union forces. We were able to hold that position for the better part of July 3rd, and subsequently Gettysburg was a Union victory instead of a Confederate victory. They had attempted to push the war to the north, and we're going to come into Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and eventually drop in on Washington, D.C. and get the government to capitulate and recognize their sovereignty. But Norval Churchill served with me through the rest of the war. In fact, after the war, I was assigned to the frontier, and I asked him, he had been given a unique job, and that he purchased my horses for me for the rest of the war. I had him in purchasing horses as well as serving in the brigade. But I asked him to come west with me, and he, of course, was farming at that time and declined that opportunity. But he saved my life at Hunterstown. Had he been at Little Bighorn, maybe. Well, I know you're all very, very hungry. And I'm going to be here as long as you would have me. This is an honor for me to be here. Thank you very much for asking me to be here.